Well, good day, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of our podcast, A Whole Middle Path, with me, Alexander, a practicing holistic therapist, and
Me. Welcome back, everyone. Lori MacLeod here. I have been a practicing, certified and registered holistic therapist and teacher of holistic medicine for over 30 years. And I'm really happy to be part of this podcast and bringing any of that information that I have trapped up here to you out there. I hope you enjoy what we have to say today. And I'm going to turn it back over to Alexander so that he can get us into our topic.
yes, the topic of today is expansion from the first episode. If you watched it, kudos, you get a cookie. We're exploring a fun chat and seeing the differences and how we can work with healthcare versus sick care.
It's a big one.
What's that? Tell me all about it. What's that?
What is the difference between healthcare and sick care? That's
know.
a really great question.
Yeah.
We have evolved into a society that really relies on somebody outside of us to determine whether or not we are healthy or sick. We've kind of lost a little bit of our autonomy, I think. And I think if we can redefine what is healthcare and what is sick care, we can get back that power or the empowerment of ourselves to say, hey, I can take control of this and I can be healthy. So healthcare versus sick care is basically empowering yourself to take control of the things you're doing, the patterns you're creating, the life you want to live, and determine the goals in that. Different views, different levels of healthcare for people are quite acceptable. One person's idea of healthcare or being healthy might be very different from another person's. And so rather than setting it on a standard that says, if you're here, you're healthy. If you're here, you're sick. The standard we should really start ascribing to is, what is it that makes me feel the best? And how can I attain that? That's healthcare. It is where I want to be. What are my goals? And how do I get there? Sick care, for me, in my experience, is when I can't overcome something, I can rely on somebody else who has the knowledge to fix it. And that could be anything from, a broken arm to, oh my gosh, I've had this cold for 6 weeks now and it's gone into my chest and I don't seem to be able to shake it. No matter what I'm doing, I can't shake it. There is a value to the system that can take hold of those outside pernicious influences like infection, colds, broken arms, and really put them back so the body has a good chance of healing. I would say that's sick care. That is a system of returning to health from an outside pernicious influence. But I would say on a general everyday level, healthcare is more about the patterns and the goals that you set for yourself autonomously, and taking that power back and saying, I have the choice to do this or not. And the level of health that I want to attain belongs to me, not to somebody else.
Well, that is quite fascinating in a way, also building again from the first episode that we did together with how people can regain more control over their lives and over their health. Basing that, at least in Canada, on our current state of health system and care systems. What is it right now? Because, in kind of my own experience and opinion, we're quite overloaded with sick people. But I want to put it in quotation because yet again, right? Where do we name whether are these people sick or are they panicking because they think, they're kind of in the state where they do need hospitalization or they need doctor's appointment to take care of themselves? Or are we just genuinely, on a scale of nation, are we in that much of despair where we need this system in effect right now? Like where were we at right now, in your experience, of course?
I think we arrived at this system because, and to put it mildly, technology rules. So we kind of lost our autonomy in this idea that we had to define everything that was happening to us. And we have to have either a test or a machine or something to tell us that this is actually happening. And people have lost that intuitional nature of being able to say, you know, I've been doing this and I don't feel that great. And I think I really know it's because I'm doing this. So we've put ourselves into a situation where we've given away our power to technology. Technology determines whether we're healthy or sick. And we're in a system that doesn't understand that there's a difference between healthcare and sick care. And what does that mean? Like why is it important for people to understand that distinction? When you train as a medical professional, you train in a system of quantifiable black and white markers that are going to tell you when something is wrong and when something is right. So you go for a blood test. If you don't meet this level in between, you know, greater than or less than, there's a problem. And so quantifiably now you're sick. Those margins are quite large in some cases. So what is normal, right? Normal in terms of anything we do for each person has a variable. And in between that, the system that we have doesn't operate very well in those variables. So you might have a person, for example, who goes for tests and everything's coming back high normal, right? And that is telling them that there's actually something tilting in the body. There's not a balance. There should be a balance between those highs and lows. Everything shouldn't come back low normal. Everything shouldn't come back high normal. There should be some mid ranges. There should be some highs and lows. That's a normal adjusting homeostatic organism or body. But what we have is a system that says as long as it's in that mid range, there's no problem. So often you will hear people say, you know, I don't trust my doctor anymore. I know there's something wrong with me. I'm not digesting properly. I don't, you know, my bowels don't work properly. This doesn't work properly. My doctor keeps telling me there's nothing wrong with me. It's all in my head. And the truth is the patterns that you're creating for your body are putting it out of balance. And that imbalance is actually taking away health. So you're not sick yet, but you're also reducing your health factor. And I think we've gotten here because of that system that we've started to trust that's very quantifiable. So it says if you're not outside that normal range, there's nothing wrong with you at all. And we've lost the ability to intuitionally know when we're out of balance because we go for those tests and we're told there's nothing wrong with you. And yet somewhere in the back of our mind, there's this niggling little thing that says, well, I can't trust this system anymore because I know there's something wrong. And so I think it's really important when you look at healthcare versus sick care, that you start to look at the balance. You start to look at identifying your body's own markers. You start to look at how your body is talking to you. And so we do a thing in holistic medicine called body talk. And that is where we literally listen to the responses of the body. We get in tune. We start to learn how the body is talking to us. And that's letting us know where the imbalances are. And so I think we got here because rather than trusting our own instincts about our own being, we created a system that tells us whether we're sick or not. We created a system that says, this is happening to you, therefore you are sick. You are in this range, therefore it's validated. And if you're not in that range, it's not valid. And I think there's a lot more to health than just those outside pernicious influences, those if you would call them emergency situations, or those situations when you've tilted over the edge. And that's the system we're relying on right now, is you have to tilt over the edge to get the care. And really what we need to go back to is, let's take care of ourselves before we hit the edge. Let's not jump off, you know, into the Grand Canyon. Let's stay up there and step back and really enjoy the scenery, but not necessarily, you know, leap over the edge. That's what I would say is important, and how we've developed what we've developed.
Well, and it's quite brilliant actually, expanding also on on that our intuitive capabilities, you know, because
yeah.
we are the operators of some of the most intricate machinery on this planet, the human
Absolutely.
body, you know.
Absolutely.
If you haven't put a thought into it, you should totally sit with it and consider that this is a very complex mechanism, and for the most part it does work on its own, you know.
Yeah.
It's not like you always have to think which enzymes to produce, where to move blood, where not to move blood, right? It just kind of on its automatic functional response. But sometimes it needs some operators, you know, guidances and
Yeah.
fixes. But it's not like we're born and here you go, there's a manual, you know, how
Yeah.
to operate this
How to
complex
operate this
machinery.
complex
Yeah.
machinery. That's right.
But what amazes me, you know, through some of my personal ventures in yogic studies is the body, besides the human intelligence, the brain only, the body has such a deep amount of intelligence where,
Yes.
you know, when like if you hold an object of food and you sit with it and you quiet your mind and you can really sense like, is this good for me or is this not good for me? And you'll get quite,
Yeah.
you know, the response, which is going to be quite on the dot and accurate.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing from you right now, because, and not to undermine, you know, all the intelligence and all the machinery and all the tests that inevitably saved, you know, probably at this time, like millions of lives,
Oh,
you know,
definitely.
through,
Hundreds of millions.
yeah, through tests and through different interventions. But how can we come back? Like, what should we implement in our daily lives to come back more to trusting ourselves? Where, you know, sometimes I'm working with people and they come in saying, like, I've been prescribed certain medications because, you know, if you're over the limit, under the limit, boof, you get some chemistry, right? Some medications to kind of fix up that balance, to put some kind of equilibrium in your system. But some people come in and they go like, I know it's wrong for me. Like my body just hates it. But
Right.
my doctor says, well, you just have to suffer through it, I guess. Or you
take
have,
another medication
yeah,
for it.
or you know, adjust the
Yeah.
doses or increase the doses or do that and that. But they're like, but my guts are telling me it's just not the right thing for me to take right
Yeah.
now. But they're also afraid to go against the educated people, right?
Yeah.
The people who spend considerable amount of their life going through educational system to how to treat certain ailments or sicknesses and things like that, right? So how do they regain the confidence to question that to begin with?
Right. That is a really good question. And I think the idea that we follow along like sheep is one of the things that is contributing to the strain on our sick care system. Another thing that you also mentioned there is that idea that somebody has spent a lot of years investing in knowing what to do when these tests come back, either positive or negative. And we definitely have placed a lot of emphasis into research and development of things that work for these situations. I don't want to downplay the role of medications. As you say, when you topple off the edge of the cliff, you need a parachute. You need something to stop your body from hitting the ground because otherwise you are not coming back. But what we're not doing is we're not looking at absolutes. And that is the difference in a healthcare system or a holistic system. Nothing is absolute. So for example, for a drug to pass into being acceptable for a drug administration, you know, it has to have an efficacy of 40%. So, and forgive me if there are some of them that have to have higher efficacy or lower efficacy, but average 40%. If you think about that, 40% of the population will benefit in the way that drug is prescribed. 60% won't. there's also what's called a placebo effect. And you talked about the brain, and you talked about the body, and you talked about the intricacies between the communication between the brain and the body. Well, the placebo effect is literally your own brain healing your body. And so we can use that. But in many of the cases, in many of the tests, if you go and take a look at the outcomes of the testings of these medications, the placebo effect is as high as 35%. So we're talking about a 5% ratio, where if you don't have the drug at all, you still get the same results. And if you do have the drug, you get the same results. And then 60% of the time, nobody gets results. So how do we work in a system like that? We work in a system like that by trusting that communication. If the body, for example, in an Eastern setting where I was under the care of Eastern physicians who use both this holistic method and our Western allopathic method, they would always say, if you're experiencing side effects, you need to stop taking it right away because the body is telling you it's not good for you. And then we'll try a different thing. And I think that in and of itself is part of the answer. If we listen to that communication between our brain and body and something is feeling off, then it's okay to say, look, I'm getting these side effects because my body is fighting this. So rather than masking that fight, let's listen to that fight and figure out what else I can do. The fact is that there is an inherent ability for the body to heal, and the brain is a big part of that. So I would say one of the things that people can be a little more confident about is shift your thinking. So shift your thinking back, not to what outside me can fix this, but what can I do on a daily basis to change what I'm already doing. And again, I don't want to downplay the idea that if you have tipped over that scale, you need something, you need a pillow, you need a parachute. And our Western allopathic medicine has saved hundreds of millions of lives with those parachutes. Do you rely on that parachute once you're down on the ground? It's something that might hold you back. So how can you shift what you're doing? Well, you need to then look at, how do I move forward in a different way so that I don't get to that edge again?
Okay.
And I think one of the things that we have to be more aware of is being able to open a discussion with our providers of care and say with our providers, okay, well, this is happening to me and this isn't my goal. So setting your health goals is important. Setting how you want to reach those goals is important. I would say that, going vegan because you think it's going to heal you is the same end of the scale as going completely and relying on a drug because you think it's going to heal you. Both of those are two of the same things. They are going to extreme measures, hoping for those measures to continually keep you healthy, while your body in and of itself is still shifting and changing in between. So somewhere you have to balance out and readjust what you're doing so that you get the best benefit and meet the goal that you want. So first thing you want to do is you want to set that health goal. What is my health goal? What am I willing to give up? What brings me joy in life? You could, I have examples of people that are on medications that are taking away their life value, but it's keeping them alive. So I think a lot of things in healthcare are about finding those goals and being able to establish those goals. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. It doesn't just have to be through meditation and breathing. It can be as simple as finding an outlet like going for a walk in the woods or playing a game that you love. Something to bring back joy, something to bring back a feeling within your body where you reach that healing level of parasympathesis, of joy and of happiness, and you shut off those good old adrenals giving you the fight or flight and the stressors or stressor reactors and chemicals that are in your body, right? So how does that come down to talking to your healthcare provider? That's another thing too. That's very hard for us. They're in short supply. these days. Healthcare
Yes.
providers are not easy to find. And it's not easy to say, oh, you can just change doctors. You can't do that. But maybe opening up a little more conversation with your physician. This is happening to me and I would prefer not to mask it. I'd like to take a different avenue through it. Can you help me find an avenue? Rather than opposing that person who's gone through all this schooling and maybe they don't have the schooling that gives a different answer, is asking them to be your partner, asking them to help you through this instead of saying, you did this to me and I don't like what you're doing. Start working with your healthcare provider and saying, I'm finding that what we're doing is probably making my quality of life worse. Instead of saying to them, the drug that you're giving me is making me more sick. I want something different.
It's like a blame game, eh?
A blame game, yeah. Well, the drug is definitely interacting with you, but in order for that person to really help you, they also need to know what your goal is. So, basically what they've been told is this drug will do this for you. This drug should stop this in each case. The side effect list could be headache, heart attack, blah, 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 blah. You hear all of that, right?
It's a big list sometimes.
And nowhere in there was a discussion between the practitioner and the patient about what the goal was. Is the patient willing to put up with all of that in order to attain maybe, not having something reoccur? Or does the patient want a better quality of life? So can we do this differently? Can we lower the dose? Can we find something alternate? Can we find a different pathway through this together that I still use your education and I find my education, and where can we find more education? And that, that partnership is going to need to develop more and more, because both the practitioner listening to the patient and their outcomes and their goals and the things that they find that work for them, and the patient being able to express what they really want in their life, rather than just feeling victimized or feeling like they're only getting half of what they really came for.
Yeah. And just to reflect slash, I guess, put into, to expand a little bit more on, because you touched on the belief system, right? The placebo effect, or the belief system, on how it is important, and in the goal setting atmosphere too. Just because we always set goals for ourselves in our daily lives. Like, we want to achieve this, we want to go through school, we want to earn this much money, we want to create this, But it feels to me that sometimes for the health in particular, people do not consider as much of, I guess, a more direct goal setting, right? In a way with the workout plans, like, why are you working out? What do you want to achieve?
Yeah.
Do you want to look big, or do you want to be strong as a bull, Well, like, what's your purpose? Do you want to run fast? Do you want to... So in the way with health, if one can do the same, I guess it would be a bit clearer in a way for them to move through, if I'm hearing that correct.
Yeah.
But also, I guess, realizing that delivering that to their physician, to their doctor, or to their holistic health practitioner is not necessarily, or I guess, inviting to shed the expectation that that person owes them that goal,
Right.
Where I find lots of the times people in kind of in a state of despair, they go to their doctor and they're demanding that they would feel better and healed, and that doctors or surgeons would do their best job, because that's their responsibility, which is true. It's their responsibility to perform the best work they trained for. But at the same time, I don't think it's healthy to have any expectations of guaranteed unless you have it in yourself, that undeniable and unshakable faith in your own journey, in your own goal setting, in your own, I guess, the destination to where you want to be, right? And as you said, not falling into the combative states, when something doesn't go your way, to get out there and start fighting, well, this is not working, or you're poisoning me, or because people genuinely, they don't, even though they have some means of testing, they have some technology, they don't really know like what's happening in
That's
your
right.
body to the full extent, right? So or they don't live your life besides those
Yeah,
15 minutes sometimes of an appointment that they have
that's
with a
right.
physician, right? So
Yeah.
they cannot fully be in your shoes as much of an empathy that they can harness. So given a break, your physicians and doctors these
Yeah.
days might help everybody too, right?
Yeah.
And you also mentioned there briefly that you've had some experiences in Eastern settings with physicians. Was it your journey in Japan as I?
Yeah, I lived 6 years in Japan, and I had some health diagnoses when I went there, and the system is interesting because here you get a diagnosis and a prognosis, and you play with that over time, and they're changing that a little bit now. They're not necessarily giving people a specific prognosis that they have to live and die by, but they're giving more broad outlooks to things here. Whereas when I went to Japan, there was always a broader outlook. It wasn't just, oh, you take this drug and this is going to fix it. There was, well, what led into this? Like, why is the body doing this? They would ask you a lot more questions, like, what are your lifestyles? What lifestyle things that you were doing? What were your stress levels? What was happening during this time when this started? What was happening? So there's a little bit more of piecing that body, mind, spirit together. And then the outcome wasn't always necessarily a prescription. Sometimes it was changing your diet. Sometimes it was getting a little bit more of a different type of exercise, creating a goal. Like, you're working out. Does that mean you want to get stronger? Does that mean you want to get faster? Does that mean you need better cardio? There's a lot of different variables to everything. And I think in the Eastern system, as I found it, they started to look at the variables. They started to look at, well, not only what was happening to you at that point, what the tests were showing, but why? Like, what was it that was happening around you, in you, through thinking, different things like that, that would create this? And so if we could adjust a few of those things, if we could change a few of those things and manage the symptoms, we could get a better outcome. And I think that's what holistic health is. It's not going against the grain so that you can just do something totally in defense or, as you say, aggressively against that idea that you did this to me. But allowing yourself to see a bigger picture. Those tests are definitely showing something, and that's why your medication is being prescribed. So what is it that's going on around the body now to put it in this situation? You didn't have that same test result 5 months ago or 5 years ago. So what's changed? What's happening? So to take a look at the environment around, to take a look at even the mindset going through it. Did you change your job? So they would ask you questions like that. Did you change your job? I mean, it was fairly obvious for me that I had gone through a huge change. I'd flown from one country to another, didn't speak the language, brand new job. There was a lot of things going on. And my wonderful little Japanese doctor just said, so, yeah, well, it's not surprising that these things are happening to you. So it wasn't an approach of this is happening specifically because you're a car and you just broke down, but because there were a lot of influences. And I think that taught me a lot. It also taught me a lot about acceptance, about being able to see past the thing that was right in front of you. It also taught me to start to look at how I felt about things. And if something was happening in my world that was really causing me a lot of stress, then it was my responsibility to change it. And we give that up a lot. It comes back a lot. It's not something that you do once and it ends. It's something that you do every morning when you put your feet on the ground. And that doesn't mean just because you know it, that you're going to do it right. It means it's really trial and error. And you try and you error. And then you try and you succeed. And so that trial and error aspect of things means that you accept the imperfection. That it's not going to be perfect. And I think that was something that was really came through in that healthcare system, was that let's look for all the imperfections. Let's look for all the little things that are happening around.
Yeah.
And then see how we can address that. See if you even want to address that. You know, there is a lot of valid information out there that shows that when people change what they're doing and they heal, it might be a little scary. You don't get to have the crutch anymore. You don't get to have the safe place anymore. So taking responsibility for your own healing also means understanding why you're not healing and understanding that it's okay. We can accept those imperfections. We can accept that.
Yeah.
We don't have to be perfect. We don't have to beat ourselves up because at this moment in our life, we're not ready to do something. And even taking that little bit of pressure off will give us that much more relief.
Beautiful. And also chiming in because I love Japanese culture, and I've done a good deal of digging and just researching their healthcare systems, and because many of the things that you taught us in school as well were based on those systems, right? And the whole shiatsu and Reiki modalities, where, you know, this whole notion of Japanese people living lengthy lives, right? And just having certain, I guess, health expectations and health focuses on their lifestyles, you know, on their weight management and all sorts of things, the food management that they do. It actually wasn't very prominent until after the Second World War, where the government decided to get directly involved into well-being of their people. And the whole healthcare system got restructured into more with the goal of more preventative medicine rather than treating the sick people, right, who already kind of in a state of despair, where as you said, right, the lifestyle recommendations and actually exploring the holistic aspect of human existence, like where do you work, where do you eat, how do you move, like all the things that you do became a forefront of their healthcare system, where even when people go on their sort of annual checkups to do their blood markers, because they still use the blood markers and things, but then they look at them differently, where they don't try to change your chemistry through a drug as a solution, but as you said, they look at your entire life's journey, where you at now, where you've been, where you want to go, like what are you doing, where you're not doing. And of course, you know, in a ways where government had their own interests of creating more long-living, healthier and more productive members of the society, because Japanese people, we all know, they're mad workaholics.
Oh, they are.
But considering how much work they do, they still live longer lives and healthier lives. I cannot state happier lives for sure, you know, but longer and healthier lives, it's just the plain statistics that we're seeing right now. So how do we compare that to the state of Canada, where, you know, I'm hearing from lots of people and lots of physicians going through their medical education, they do not quite get a lot of time allocated to, you know, to explore the dietary recommendations or different kind of more holistically oriented lifestyle recommendations, nor they are encouraged to do so, because it leads to, I guess, a more questionable legality zone in our system and the structure. Does that make sense to you, or is
I think in a way,
is it a hocus pocus misinformation?
I don't know. When you consider the education of healthcare and the education of healthcare workers, it has had to become more specific and more specific with less time invested in each patient because there are such huge shortfalls in the numbers of people that are working in the system and the numbers of patients that are entering the system. So they can't possibly keep up with the load. And the one thing that you brought up that was really interesting is the government itself. When the government takes a role in realizing that healthier people mean less overhead and more productivity, you get a shift in thinking. And I have the thing that we have here is an individualistic thinking, that each person has the right for and the ability to only live their life. And that's I think part of our development as a country where there's so much space in between people.
Okay.
For one thing, you've got pioneers that your nearest neighbor was 10 miles away. You become incredibly independent, and the world around you doesn't matter. And that gives you that individualistic, I'm the maker of everything and all my goals and all my needs and whatnot. And then you get a community like you have in Japan where everybody lives side by side and they all have to cohabitate, and there's a lot more support and families stay close, and you have a system where the whole belief is we as a community do something. It lends itself to being a more solid, more healthy base to be from. So in our system now, it's each for his own, right? I want this for me now, rather than developing a network and a community of support. Now we're starting to see that more. We're starting to see even in healthcare where they're realizing that a lot of solutions to things are in community. They are in support of people feeling connected. And I think that is a huge difference in a mindset that if you're going to have a healthcare system where we're treating individuals and we're treating as many individuals as we possibly can, we're going to run them through on a 5 to 10 minute scale. We're going to treat one thing at a time. We're going to focus on only one thing at a time because that's the immediate need. And when you live that pioneer individual lifestyle, it's your immediate needs must be met. If you live in that community-centered network of abilities, many needs are being met on many different levels at the same time. So we still have that mindset where we are going to treat the most imminent thing right now.
Yes.
We don't have that mindset that if we created a larger community, if we created a larger hub, that many of those things would already be taken care of because there would be that supportive network. And that is a huge shift to make. And how do you make that shift, right? One of the things that helps to make that shift is making proactive communities. So giving people more options for networking their health rather than just seeing one person. So we have this really individualistic nature of, if I'm sick, I go see my doctor.
Yeah.
We need more proactive healthcare communities. Maybe if you're feeling a little off and you're finding that diet is an issue, instead of going to see the doctor, you could be working with someone who works with nutrition. And then we don't have to give our doctors 2 more years in school so that they can learn nutrition. Instead, we can have somebody who's totally involved in and develops that idea of health through nutrition as part of that healthcare network.
Yes.
So I guess what you have then is you have a triaging system. You have a system and a network of practitioners that work together, which is what you always had in Japan. I didn't just go see my doctor. I also worked with my shiatsu therapist, and I worked with my nutrition therapist, and I worked with my doctor, and they were all part of a team. And I saw my doctor the once for the intake and triaged, and then I didn't see him again. I went, I came off my horse and I compressed 3 vertebrae in my spine, and I spent the next 6 weeks with a shiatsu therapist twice a day on their table. And in 6 weeks, I was back on a horse again.
Yeah.
With x-rays that looked great. But I saw my doctor 6 weeks later at the end. And in between, I saw the shiatsu therapist, and I saw the acupuncturist, and I saw so I had a network of people that I saw. And while I was seeing those other people, there were other people seeing the rest of the team. So it really increased the number of patients that they could put through. Okay. It really increased the ability for you to find an avenue of healing that was directly related to what you needed, rather than the 7 hours of nutrition for a doctor who's supposed to deal with all your nutritional needs, and kind of throws up their hands and says, here, just take an antacid. Yeah. Because we haven't really developed that ability in that time for that 1 hour interview to find out what it is you're doing nutritionally that's causing this, or even emotionally or mentally. I mean, we haven't even hit those yet, right? Yeah. So you're looking at a system that is built on community in an Eastern system, and that's what that taught me, was that there was more than one person involved in that health community. And then you're in this pioneer system that we invent something that is the be all and end all panacea, and all we have to do is just deliver it to everybody through one person. Yeah. And that is not necessarily working anymore, because we live in a more crowded life now. We live with a lot more stress now. And again, don't get me wrong, I lived in a country where people work 12 hours a day. They smoke, they drink, they do, oh my gosh. Like, I had thought, if you think we have unhealthy habits, I had seen some unhealthy habits that continued on day after day after day after day after day, and they're healthier people. How did that work? How does that work? Because they had that community. They're close to their families. They're close to their coworkers. There's support systems. The company provides a daily exercise program. There's, in the schools, the meals are provided. So everybody is provided for in that community sense. Well, and here, again, we're expecting that one person to deliver the panacea to all. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. And we're finding it doesn't work that way.
Well, that brings a little bit of, I guess, hope. And Canadian government, if you're watching us today, and
think about the community.
Invitation, right? Because it's a challenging subject of matter. Because we are fortunate, living in Canada, where we have our MSP plans. They're covered by the government, so healthcare is technically free, right?
No, Sickcare is free.
Sickcare.
Healthcare is not covered.
Aha!
Here is where you have that community mind. I lived in a country where if your doctor felt nutritionally you were a little bit down, he'd prescribe you a multivitamin, and that was covered.
Yeah.
But you paid your 10%. Everybody paid their 10%, but your prescriptions were covered. And by prescriptions, as long as your healthcare provider said you needed multivitamins, they were paid for. If you needed eye drops, they were paid for it. Like, you live in a system where healthcare is provided to you, rather than just sick care being provided to you. And
I'm really happy that you caught that particular distinguishment, right? Because I think that's the focal point of this episode, to deliver. Because for so many people, it's an interesting aspect to learn how to recognize the differences between two. And yet again, like, we're fortunate living in Canada, but how can we do better, right? And implementing the system, and thankfully we're seeing more and more of that, because again, with the last episode, we're covering a little bit on holistic insurances and the flex plans and all of that, where things are getting a little bit more accessible for people to dabble into a little bit more healthcare / communal ways of taking care of themselves, where they can go and see specialists out of the scope of just allopathic medicine, right?
Yes.
The general medical practice. So it's very delightful that we are hopefully taking that path and direction where the governments would be a bit more incentivized because
Right.
of the public demands to shift and allow for more coverages between just our, throughout our general healthcare plans to make a use. Because otherwise, you go, you see a shiatsu therapist, you go see a dietary specialist, you go see that and this, and then it ends up being like a lot of money per month that you need, to go and see just individual specialists. And considering some of the state of affairs that we're facing right now, not that many people who are already in dire need of such services, they just cannot afford them.
They can't access
in the scope that it would be beneficial to them in timely fashion, right? Because sometimes, as you we chatted about your Japan trip, the way you were prescribed shiatsu, was it like 3 times a day? Three
in
times
the first
a day
few
in
days,
the first week, or in the
first few
days?
days, I had to go a couple of times a day for the therapy.
That's fascinating.
And then it was as the healing took place over the first, I would say the first 2 weeks were the most intense. And it was interesting because my employer had no problem. Like, it was my appointment time. They just made sure I was available to go to my appointment time. They would even encourage me. It's like, don't forget, you have to, you have your appointment. It was interesting because I didn't speak Japanese all that well. So my employer had to be more proactive in assisting me, and they would set up appointment times and, send me off. But I think the thing was that the front end load was, I would say, a lot. Like seeing that practitioner, 3 times a day for the first 2 to 3 days, and then down to 2 times a day, and then once a day and every second day. And finally, but by the end of 6 weeks, I was riding again. And I wasn't seeing a practitioner anymore, or a doctor, or dealing with compressions and whatnot. They were healing very well, very quickly.
Yes.
And so while the front end load was high, the length of time that I was in the system was unquestionably unheard of in a North American system. When you even have whiplash now, they don't settle your, automobile accident. If you have whiplash, they won't settle for 3 years because it takes 3 years before we're going to see what that result is. So instead of 3 years in a system where you're continually looking for that end result, if you can shorten that to 6 weeks, you're saving huge dollars. And I would say that, I think that our policymakers, I would challenge them to take a look at other systems, to take a look at how you could maybe take 20% of your budget that you already have and focus that on healthcare, on changing habits, on creating better health networks, community, creating support for people, placing the ability for a person to see that therapist after that car accident, at least even 3 or 4 times in the first week, and take that 20% of your budget and focus it on that. And then could you take out maybe 20 to 40% of the people that are in long-term or surgical or high blocked up areas of our healthcare system? Could you take them out of that?
Yeah.
And how much are you going to save, right? Can you balance it a little better that way? And we have progressively gone further and further and further away from keeping people healthy, and further and further and further into trying to put a Band-Aid on a leaky boat that's sinking. 2 years before you can even get in to see a specialist and then another year or two before you get your knee looked after.
Yeah.
So if you've had that problem for 2 years and it hasn't been addressed for 2 years, it's probably not going to improve. But how about addressing it in the first 3 or 4 months
But
through therapy?
then again, right, we're talking about 2 years of a very finite human life existence,
Yeah.
right? So if you're lucky, you get 80 years on this planet, right?
Yeah.
And 2 out of them, that's like, it's a high percentage.
Yeah.
And it's
Quality of life.
a quality of life, and that's also input in the community, right? The
Yeah.
less of a quality of life one has, the less of an input they're going to have in the community.
That's
just
right.
because their cup is not full on their own, right? They're
Yeah.
not mobile if it's their extreme, like a knee issues
Yeah.
and things, right? Or with the whiplash, they might get stressed easier. They might get the fear factor of things it just kicks in. The body holds on that stress. So their productivity in general, excitement and joy of life, just going to be lower by default.
That's right.
And if it's not resolved in a timely fashion, to stretch it through 3 years, or some people, they come in and we do sessions on them and they go like, oh, I had these memories 20 years ago, I had this whiplash and things are coming up,
Yeah.
it's, and
The body's holding on to it.
but it's all connected, right?
Yeah.
If we're preaching and we're following the
Yeah.
holistic way of living, right? How does that one person, because they're going to be interacting with their family, friends, children, and that state of their personal distress can start affecting, their immediate community. And
Yeah.
it just everything is so connected in that
Yeah.
way. So if we are focusing more and more on the healthcare and on just maintaining and improving the health level rather than patching up the inevitable, or this weirdly consistent decline that we just
Yeah.
cannot keep up with anymore here on the Western Shores continents, it feels
It feels overwhelming, doesn't it?
it feels scary sometimes,
Yeah.
not gonna lie, but at the same time, being in the industry and just seeing how much more in demand the work that I do personally
Yeah.
these days becoming, it just gives me hope that, yet again, people just taking reins in their own hands,
Yeah.
they're setting money aside for
Yeah.
themselves just to pay out of their own pocket, but
Yeah.
to improve their lives because they can no longer take, any less.
And I tell people, if you want our industrial or our, policymakers, if you want those people to make changes to our system, tell them.
Yes.
Be vocal. Because honestly, we have a system right now that tells us what it's going to give us. We should be asking that system to say to us, what do you need? How can I help you? What can I do for you? The system is always going to have limitations. It's always going to have a point where it can't go past. But within the scope of that system, instead of just sort of saying the system says you have to do this or else you're non-compliant,
Yes.
start creating a system that says, in the scope of what I do, how can I help you? What do you need? What is your goal? I mean, the first thing we should be asking a person, and I guess the first thing I teach my students, is you don't need to invest in the outcome. You're not going to fix this person. You may not even help this person because that is taking away their power. Instead, ask the person what they want. What is your goal?
Yeah.
Because if you know what the person's goal is, you know what you are capable of doing within your scope of practice that will help them, or for lack of a better word, elevate them towards gaining that goal for themselves. And a lot of times we want to take that, almost that hero complex that says, I fixed that person. And the fact is we can't fix anybody because it's not our place to do that. Our place is to assist people on their path. Our place is to be part of that network, part of that supportive community that's cheering you on and saying, you can do this.
Yeah.
You see your goal, you can do this. And if they don't reach the goal, saying to them after, well, why didn't you?
Yeah.
Because it's not my responsibility. it's yours.
Might?
I'm not going to fix you.
Yeah.
You're going to fix you. But I'm certainly going to be your cheerleader and give you any of the gifts that I can along the way. And if those gifts help elevate you towards your goal, great. And if they don't, maybe we should sit down and talk about your goal. Was it attainable? Was it unattainable? Maybe it wasn't your goal. Did you think about your goal? You know, that type of giving the person back their power, giving the person back the ability to say, you know what, I really don't want to feel better because then I have to go and do that. And I don't want to do that. So my goal is not to feel better, but I would like to feel less pain in the place I'm in. And how can I do that? So I would say that, you know, how can we get a shift to happen more quickly? Be vocal about what we want. Create, or really sit down and think about what we want to begin with. And then be vocal about what we want. And, you know, basically when you're looking at a lot of the things in our healthcare now, they are based on profits. They're based on meeting market supply and demand. I hear a lot of people saying that, you know, hospitals are being run by, like, as businesses. This is being run as a business. And I go, well, great. That's to our advantage because we're the consumer. And the consumer decides whether or not they're going to buy. So as a consumer, demand what you want. Demand to buy the thing that you actually want to receive. And if it's being run like a business, they're going to start providing it because they're going to say, whoa, nobody's buying this product off the shelf, but they all want that product. So why don't we provide that product and make a profit? And I don't really have anything against them making a profit in healthcare because that just means there's more money for healthcare. So, but get the care you want, you know, request the care you want.
And it's, I love it. And you know, I'm always this a hopeful, cheerful person, thinking and genuinely seeing lots of progress these days. So I think we're on the right track. But as you said, and what kind of, because we are coming almost to an end of our today's podcast, but it naturally leads things that you're bringing up, right? Setting the goal for yourself, it leads us to the next topic of podcast, that if you're following us and you're paying attention, tune in, please, where next in line we're going to be exploring finding yourself, where you at, because setting the goals and expressing your desires can be very challenging things. I know for me it very much was, you know, like the upbringing, the culture, many things that can influence, I guess, our own sense of identity and development, and how to be vocal with it too, and not being afraid to express it. But where do we begin, right? So the next big theme on the menu is going to be self-identity, changing yourself versus embracing your growth. So yeah, that's going to be fun.
That's going to be an interesting one, because a lot of people think in order to grow, they have to change everything about themselves. And I would say not so much. In order to grow, you have to really embrace who you are and allow that journey to happen. So we're going to talk about that a little bit.
We have tons of information to unpack and explore in this avenue. And yet again, a little disclaimer that we are sharing with you our professionality, our personal journeys, and in a way, some truths and some solutions and some challenges as we see them. But please make your own decisions. You know, we give you all this information to sit with, to work with, and to make decisions on your own. So yeah, take it with that.
Yeah, so hopefully we've helped people a little bit think about how to take control of their health. And I think, you know, a big thing to remember after this episode is the difference between healthcare and sick care.
Yes.
And the fact that you are the driver in your journey on this road. So, you know, it's going to get really interesting as we start to talk about moving forward.
Yeah.
And I've enjoyed our discussion today. Again, a lot
as
of it
well.
is our own experience, but I hope people can find some really valuable things in our discussion today.
I do. That's for sure.
All right.
All right. Well, and if you'd like to know more about us and follow things that we do, you can find me active on Instagram under the tag of Owlnest Stories. And Lori?
You can find me on Facebook under Eastern Arts Therapy, where I do my Live Better, Live Longer, and I will try my best to get a little few tidbits out there for people once in a while. And upcoming soon, we'll have even more information on Learn It Live and easternarts.ca. So those are the places where I currently reside.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.